And yeah, as Robin said, I'm the branch president here at Sheffield UCU, and I'm also one of the 3 elected negotiators on USS. And I have been since June last year, so a year and a bit. I wasn't there when the strikes were on a year and a half ago, but I joined that summer. And I'm going to give you a very brief summary of what's currently going on, 10 or 15 minutes max. And the plan is then Robin's going to tell you about pay and the associated matters of workload, casualisation, pay inequality, stuff like that. And then we'll have lots of time for questions and answers, so please get your questions ready. Okay, so yeah, USS, I'm guessing almost everyone here will know what I'm about to say, but it's the pension scheme for staff across the pre-92 sector. It's predominantly a defined benefit scheme, which means that the benefits you get in retirement are calculated based on the number of years you've worked and your salary over the time you've worked, and you get a secure income in retirement. Of course, a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, that was under significant threat when employers said they wanted to move it to what we call a defined contribution scheme. That's a scheme whereby you put in money, employers put in money, goes into a pot, grows or not according to the stock market, and when you retire you can take your money and do what you want with it. So there was a big pushback. Now, why did employers want to do that? Well, that was because of a valuation of the scheme, which is a necessary thing every 3 years. What happens is every 3 years you have to check how much money has been put into this scheme and calculate to make sure it will pay the benefits that are being promised. And USS were claiming a year and a half ago that the amount of money in the scheme wasn't getting close to covering the benefits. There was a big deficit, $7.5 billion or something like that. And so something had to change. Now, of course, UCU members went on strike about this issue because we didn't believe the valuation methods. And so that's where my interest in this issue came in. As a mathematician, I was looking at the valuation and looking at the assumptions underlying it, realizing that there wasn't enough data to go off to make an informed decision, trying to get more information, and eventually, the criticism that came from UCU around the lack of transparency on the valuation and some crazy aspects of how it was being done, notably something called Test 1, resulted in employers agreeing firstly to take off the table the defined contribution proposal, and then secondly, to set up what was called a joint expert panel to look at the valuation and report on where the truth was there, essentially. So the joint expert panel reported a year ago, September 2018, and I was present at the unveiling of that report. Joanne Seegers was the chair of that panel. She came to speak to UCU's negotiators and UUK's negotiators at the USS Joint Negotiating Committee. And she outlined her findings, and you could see the relief on the faces all around when she revealed that their findings were that essentially, and this is paraphrasing, that the valuation was flawed, that there was no need for contribution rates as high as USS were claiming, that the deficit wasn't as big as was claimed, and that there was a way forward based on lower contribution rates. So that seemed to be a major breakthrough in this dispute. And it came off the back of the strike action, of course. It was one of the reasons we stopped striking, was to commission this report. Now, the unfortunate thing is that that wasn't the end of the story. Why not? Well, we were, so UCU and the membership of UCU were behind this report. The employers said they were behind this report as well and agreed with its findings. The problem was it was up to the pension scheme to implement the findings. That's USS. And over the course of the next 6 months, they gradually chipped away at the recommendations from that report. To begin with, they showed us what would happen if you implemented all the recommendations, and they showed that against an updated valuation as at March 2018, which was the way they said they'd like to proceed. And if they applied all the recommendations to the market data, if you like, at March 2018, what they found was there was a surplus, the deficit had gone away, and the contribution rates dropped below the rate that we were paying before the strike started, a total of 25.5% as opposed to 26% that we were paying before. So that was what they showed us, and then gradually they dropped elements of these recommendations until, fast forward to this summer, and they're proposing that rates have to go up. So in fact, the valuation that they proceeded with was one based at 2018. We're calling it the 2018 valuation, and it's based on exactly the same methodology that was used in 2017. No change at all, other than using updated market data, which was far from what the Joint Expert Panel recommended. So when they do that, they find a big deficit, 3.6 billion. Now, this is smaller than in 2017, but that's because there was a good year from March 2017 to March 2018, or another way of putting it, the investments outperformed the pessimistic forecasts that USS had for them. So the deficit fell, but it's still there. And the contribution rates they want to see, so this is for members. Before the strikes, we were paying 8%. The contribution rates, according to USS, have to go up to 9.6% starting next month, and then 11% 2 years after that. So these are big steps up. And remember, we already got one step up in April last year from 8 to 8.8%. So this month we're paying 8.8. From next month it goes to 9.6, and then 2 years down the line it's going up to 11%. And this is because the valuation that came out that was used, the methodology that was used in the 2018 valuation didn't take into account the Joint Expert Panel's recommendations. And that's the basis for the fact that the UCU are now in dispute over USS again, and we're balloting members because the Joint Expert Panel's recommendations have been essentially rejected and contribution rates are going up. Okay. So yeah, why are we balloting? Now, on the surface of it, it's because the rates are going up. Fundamentally, as a negotiator for UCU, I'd say it's fundamentally about this point. It's about power and shifting the balance of power. Now, when I was first on the Joint Negotiating Committee in summer last year, that was quite soon after the strikes had finished, and it was clear that UCU were being listened to. Employers were being relatively deferential to what we said. By the time the Joint Expert Panel's report came out in September, USS were kind of on the ropes and reeling. Employers were looking at this Joint Expert Panel's report as a way to get things done, and UCU's voice was being heard. But what happened over the course of the next 6 months was a gradual shift in power balances back again. USS started that 6 months looking like they were prepared to implement the Joint Expert Panel's recommendations against the 2018 data. That's what they first showed us at the Joint Negotiating Committee. By December, it was clear they were dropping some of them. By the time you got to the summer, they dropped all of them. It was quite a clever way to regain, if you like, the power in the story. Universities UK, gradually over that time period, listened to UCU less and less. The first place was when they decided to engage with USS on things called trigger contributions, which USS said would be one way to bring these rates lower than the ones I showed you. And they spent a good few months negotiating with USS over trigger contributions. Those negotiations came to nothing in the end. UCU had said that we didn't think that was the way to proceed, though we were happy to let them have a try. But the ultimate story was that these trigger contribution discussions essentially wasted time and didn't get anywhere. Then USS came up with something they called option 3, which resulted in the rates that I showed you on the screen. Employers at that stage were very keen on telling us at the Joint Negotiating Committee, and you as members, if you've seen any of their communications, that this is what the Joint Expert Panel recommended when it's far from it. Okay, and I've written an article that you could probably find on USS Briefs about just how far away what happened was compared to the Joint Expert Panel's report. So this is all about shifting power. People only listen when you threaten or go on strike, and it's really disappointing. As someone who's spent a year and a bit now talking, so many meetings, so many discussions, the discussions don't work until you threaten to strike. So that's why we're balloting. Another reason is that the basis for the next valuation, they're conducting one as at March 2020, so the methodology for that one is being formed right now, as in there's a group being set up which is due to meet in October, or that's what we've been told, which will look at how to formulate the valuation methodology for the 2020 valuation. Now, once that valuation methodology is fixed, there's going to be a huge fight to try and get it overturned. So now is when that's being formed. Now is the time we need to be listened to. The second JET report is imminent. It was supposed to be due this month. So the report last year was a kind of preliminary report that identified the failings in the 2017 valuation and gave a patch for that. The follow-up report this month is to talk about valuation methodology more generally and also look at governance issues at USS, of which there are plenty of issues to discuss. I don't think I've really got time to touch on them, although if you want to ask questions, please do. Anyway, when that report comes out, it needs to be taken seriously. The last one was fobbed off. We can't allow this report to just get sidelined in the way that the last one was. You may be tempted, and employers are trying to say that the reasonable way forward here is to wait and see. Firstly, wait and see what the second JET report says, and then secondly, wait and see if USS take any account of it. Now, that's the approach that has got us to where we are now with rising contribution rates. We've put a lot of faith in people to do to do the right thing. We put a lot of faith in an independent assessment of the report, called off our strike action on the back of it. We then essentially had to put faith in people to implement what that report said, and we got nothing back from that. So we're being asked to do the same again, to wait and see what the report says, see whether USS are as intransigent as they have been throughout this whole story, and then, if necessary, then we can talk about solutions. But at this stage, I hope you agree with me that this could potentially be a disastrous approach. And if we were in the situation in a year's time whereby the valuation had been fixed, another huge deficit, rates going up even higher, the battle would be huge. Now's the time, I mean, it's long gone, the time's long gone to talk about the valuation methodology properly, but it has to happen now to be listened to. We need to be on the verge of strike action, if not striking. The other aspect to this is that employers can afford to pick up these extra costs. So we're asking for employers to take everything over the 8% that we were paying before the strike action. Now, if they do that, for the first 2 years, it will... in fact, I'm spoiling something from Robin's talk. So maybe I'll leave Robin to talk about how much staff costs have fallen as a proportion of income for universities. But over the last decade or so, they've fallen significantly. Asking employers to absorb these costs for the first 2 years would barely register on that scale. Asking them to take them, even when they've leapt up to 11%, would only go about halfway to restoring where staff costs were as a proportion of expenditure for universities a decade ago. But Robin will show you graphs and talk about that more. Okay, so I think that's all I was going to say in my initial splurge, and then there will be time for questions afterwards. There are some links in these slides. I keep meaning to put these on Twitter somewhere. If you find me on Twitter, eventually you'll find a link to these slides and you can click through to the various links there. But I think I'll stop there, and Robin, you're going to talk about pay and associated matters.